Long before coins, contracts, or written law, sweetness was rare. In a world without refined sugar, it appeared only where landscapes and seasons allowed it. It could not be produced on demand or expanded simply by planting more of it. Sweetness arrived briefly as fruit, unpredictably as sap, and in scattered concentrations of flowering plants. Before coins, before banks, belief ruled the world. Honey was different. It was already processed by an insect society and sealed into a form that resisted time. Unlike most foods, it did not demand immediate consumption. It could be gathered, held, and returned to later. In environments where scarcity was routine and surplus fragile, this made honey unusual. It was sweetness that endured. Honey mattered because it sat outside the usual tempo of subsistence. Most foods forced immediacy, meat spoiled, fruit collapsed into rot. Many gathered plants were abundant only briefly and then vanished. Even where drying or smoking worked, the process consumed labor and fuel and still produced supplies that degraded. Honey was different. When kept dry and protected, it could remain usable far longer than expected for an animal product. In practice, it behaved like a preserved food without requiring preservation techniques. It concentrated calories, tolerated storage, and could be moved. These were not minor advantages. They marked the emergence of an economic property, value that could be held across time. This durability was not accidental. Honey functioned as a chemical lock. Its water activity, the amount of free water available to support microbial life, is so low that bacteria and fungi cannot survive within it. Any microorganisms that enter are effectively dehydrated and neutralized. This made honey the only widespread biological substance in the prehistoric world capable of zero-maintenance storage, a surplus that preserved itself without ongoing human labor. To understand why honey could function as a store of value, modern assumptions must be set aside. In early human economies, value did not begin as a symbol. It began as control over something that remained useful when time passed. Storage was not merely technical, it was social discipline. A group that could preserve something and delay consumption could survive scarcity with less fear, negotiate from a stronger position, and reward cooperation without exhausting reserves. Honey fit this logic with unusual efficiency. It was not just sweetness, but sweetness that could wait. Honey was also difficult to obtain in predictable quantities without specialized knowledge. Long before domesticated beekeeping, it came mainly from wild hives. Finding them required environmental attention. Watching insect flight paths, reading hollow trees, scanning cliffs and rock fissures, sensing where flowering plants concentrated bees. Extraction required risk. Smoke could calm insects, but not eliminate danger. Climbing could fail. Falls could injure or kill. Stings were painful and sometimes dangerous. Honey was therefore a high-reward acquisition tied to uncertainty. Where food can be gathered safely by anyone, it tends to be ordinary. Where it requires skill and risk, it separates into a category that can be claimed, guarded, and exchanged. Harvesting wild honey also imposed a specific geometry of cooperation. The task rarely involved a single individual. One person climbed toward the hive, accepting the direct risk of injury or death, while others remained below managing smoke, stabilizing ropes, or preparing containers. The risk was asymmetrical, but the reward was collective. This created a recurring form of joint venture. Unequal exposure to danger paired with shared output. Such an arrangement could only persist if distribution followed contribution. If the climber did not receive a larger share of the sweetness, the risk was refused. Honey thus forced the invention of distribution protocols long before formal contracts. An early prototype of dividend logic enforced not by law, but by physical refusal. Archaeological indicators suggest humans have engaged with bees and bee products for a very long time. Depictions of honey gathering appear in prehistoric art in multiple regions, and chemical traces consistent with beeswax have been found in early pottery across much of the Old World. Beeswax is not honey, but it is closely associated with honey use, storage, and processing, implying repeated contact rather than accident. These traces do not prove a universal honey economy, but they do show a stable pattern. Honey and bee products were repeatedly collected, handled, and stored in human-made containers. That is sufficient to treat honey as economically meaningful, not merely edible. One of the clearest visual records of this interaction appears in cave paintings from eastern Iberia, dated to the early Neolithic period. These images show human figures climbing toward wild hives, suspended by ropes or footholds, while insects swarm around them. The scenes do not depict exchange or storage, but they do document repeated, organized honey gathering involving risk, coordination, and planning. What they confirm is not an economy, but a sustained relationship between humans and a substance worth the effort to obtain. In small-scale societies, the boundary between food and wealth is not fixed. Wealth is often edible, wearable, or usable. The difference lies in behavior, what is consumed immediately and what is held, displayed, redistributed, or exchanged. Honey could function as wealth because it was both desirable and holdable. It offered concentrated energy and translated effort into something that could be kept. It turned time into a tool. Honey's physical properties made it well suited to this role. It is dense and viscous. It does not require grinding, cooking, or elaborate transformation to become valuable. It can be portioned, diluted into drinks, spread onto other foods, or consumed in small controlled quantities. Divisibility matters. A store of value that cannot be divided forces all or nothing sharing. Honey can be shared precisely. It can be given as a measured gift that signals generosity without exhausting reserves. It can reward an individual without destabilizing the group. It can also be accumulated quietly and revealed when needed. This is one mechanism by which honey becomes economic rather than merely nutritional. Its value lies not only in what it provides to the body, but in how it manages relationships. In a favor-based world, relationships are infrastructure. Survival depends on reciprocity, alliance, and obligation. Anything that can be stored and released strategically becomes a tool for shaping trust. Honey suits this role because it is widely valued, but not universally accessible. It is important not to overstate standardization. Honey was rarely money in the later sense. It did not usually become a formal unit of account across large territories. It was not stamped, certified, or guaranteed by authority. What it did become was a reliable high-value good, capable of settling needs, rewarding labor, or supporting negotiation. Exchange does not require coins. It requires mutual recognition of worth. Honey often achieved that recognition because it was useful, difficult to obtain, and hard to counterfeit. Honey also carried another layer of value. It was effective. Many societies used honey in healing contexts. Even without microbiology, people observed outcomes. Wounds treated with honey often fared better than those left untreated. Honey could soothe, coat, and protect. This reliability elevated its status. A food that heals becomes more than food. It becomes a tool. Tools are a major category of stored value because they preserve future capacity. If honey protected health or aided recovery, it functioned as an investment in strength. Alongside medicine, honey entered ritual and ceremonial life. It was offered, mixed into drinks, and used where ordinary calories were not the point. When a scarce material becomes part of ceremony, it gains stability. Ceremony repeats and anchors behavior across generations. A substance used in ritual is valued not only for private use, but for collective meaning, making it more resistant to casual consumption. The group comes to expect its presence, encouraging storage, guarding, and managed access. At the same time, honey's value faced limits. It required containers. Storage demands vessels and protected space. Before widespread pottery, storage relied on skins, gourds, bark, wooden vessels, or natural cavities, each with limitations. Honey's stickiness and attraction to insects or animals created risk of loss. As pottery spread, this changed. Containers did more than hold honey. They standardized it. A jar of a given size became a repeatable unit. Once surplus can be measured, it can be compared. Once it can be compared, obligation and debt become calculable. Honey also highlights a tension between opportunism and continuity. A single honey find can be consumed quickly and forgotten. A repeated supply requires memory, restraint, and shared norms. If a hive is destroyed or over-harvested, the source collapses. Even without formal beekeeping, groups could learn sustainable patterns through experience. Over time, this pushed societies toward implicit resource management. Management does not require a state. It requires norms: who may take, when, how much, and under what conditions. Honey, because it is valuable and risky, encourages such norms. Norms are where early value systems become structure. When access becomes regular, entitlement emerges. Ownership here is not legal title, but recognized relationship. The person who found a site, the group that remembers it, the lineage that returns, the practices others respect. Honey sites, trees, cliffs, rock shelters could become part of a remembered landscape. Even unfenced, they could be socially marked. That marking, enforced by expectation and consequence, is already an economic institution. When honey is exchanged, its value intensifies because it represents both labor and risk. A gift of honey contains time spent searching, climbing, smoking, harvesting, transporting, and preserving. This makes it a strong social signal. Honey is valuable not only because it is rare, but because it proves competence. Competence can become power. Those who reliably obtain honey demonstrate environmental knowledge and physical ability. In societies where leadership often depends on demonstrated capacity rather than office, this matters. Honey can also bridge local life and wider exchange. Unlike bulky foods, it is relatively energy-dense and transportable. It can move beyond immediate foraging range, directly or through exchange chains. Even small networks benefit from portable valuable goods. Connection increases the importance of trust, and honey's stable desirability makes it easier to trade between non-kin. It functions as a credible token of good faith. As societies grow, honey's limits become clearer. It is constrained by ecology. Bees require flowering landscapes and seasonal stability. Production cannot scale indefinitely without management. Beekeeping increases supply and stability, but ties production to settled patterns and introduces stronger control. Managed hives can be claimed and defended more easily than wild ones, pushing honey toward property and hierarchy. Even so, honey cannot support large-scale surplus. Agricultural societies found grains could be stored in enormous quantities, extracted predictably, measured and taxed. Grain scales. Honey does not. It remains valuable but cannot bear the weight of expanding systems. This pattern repeats throughout history. Early stores of value begin as rare and stable goods, then give way to materials better suited to scale and standardization. Seen as a whole, honey offers a clean model of pre-coin value. It is valuable because it is rare, durable, divisible, labor-intensive, risky to obtain, and socially regulated. Wealth does not begin as abstraction. It begins as stored capacity, calories, health, cooperation, obligation. Honey stores all of these at once, which is why it appears repeatedly across distant regions and long spans of time. Honey helps explain why money later becomes imaginable. Money is not invented into emptiness. It rests on repeated experiences of stable value, things that hold worth, that people accept, that can be stored and exchanged without collapse. Honey made that experience tangible. It showed that time could be captured inside a substance and released later to shape outcomes. In that sense, honey is not a peripheral curiosity of economic history. It is part of its foundation, a pre-coin demonstration that trust can be held in the hand. In the next episode, we will examine how obsidian became a vehicle of long-distance value. Control over sharpness, distance, and scarcity allowed stone to function as trust across strangers and across time.